Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala barakatuh. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alamin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Alhamdulillah, by the grace of Allah, we can continue our discussion on how we can see the perspective of post-Islamic psychology from the four levels of the spiritual, emotional, mental and physical, and how they relate to our existence in this world and how they relate to our existence in the hereafter, beyond space, beyond time, forever and ever and ever, as ordained by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who's our Lord, our Creator, whom we submit and we ask for help. So what is important is for us, when we look at this whole behavioral pattern, when we talk about feelings, emotion and thinking loop, this loop is going round and round and round. Our feelings constantly, if it is being input into a constant, for example, the sense of stress, then it becomes an emotional stress. That means feelings is a story or an input of data that goes into more feelings becomes an emotion, and this emotion is then developed into a thinking both at a conscious and subconscious mind. So the thinking, feeling, emotion loop can be either a positive behavior towards success or a negative behavior towards failure or stress or difficulties. But what is important is, from the perspective of circular psychology, we are talking about physiology only. Alright? We are not talking, now they're talking about the conscious and subconscious mind. Now they're talking about the emotional strength or the EQ, as well as the inner core of human being from the perspective of the emotion. And a few people are talking about the spirituality, the nature of ourselves, of who we are, why we are on this earth, and where are we going to after the death of our physical body. So there's a lot of research. For example, now they're talking about the holographic universe, that this universe is just like a hologram. Well, that is some of the thinking that they're putting on. Or they're talking about quantum entanglement, they're talking about coherence, they're talking about the flow, they're talking about synchronicity, many things that transcend beyond the physiology of our existence. That's why when we talk about, say for example, the stress response, as I mentioned to you, our stress response is triggered by our amygdala, that triggers our autonomic nervous system, which is actually being triggered by our adrenal gland, giving the adrenal hormone for us to be ready for flight and flight. But at this point, when we have our stress response, our frontal lobe switch off. That's why we cannot think. And it is very important for us to switch off this stress response. If all the time we are stressed, just like the modern human being today, all the time we are thinking in terms of flight, and our frontal lobe is switched off. Once it is switched off, this frontal lobe, our thinking brain, is switched off, then we are working at the level of an idiot or a zombie, because we cannot think very clearly. So many of us are actually living in that situation because of stresses. So when we look at this system, we always go back to this system of the understanding that it is the physiology, because the physiology receives from the feeling, emotion, thinking mode input in terms of hormonal input, in terms of biochemical, in terms of electrical signal that is going on throughout our organ in the physical body. So because of that predominance, then we conclude that everything that we have is just the physiology, the conscious realm and its manifestation. But from the perspective of Islam, the conscious realm of the physical body is just an add-on. We are a spiritual being living in a physical body for a specific period in our existence in this world. So our existence actually is basically spiritual, emotional, mental, in that sense. Okay? So if we talk about, say, this reality, our physiology that is receiving all this input, whether it is the electrical signal that goes into our heart, for example, we have the heart rate variability, HRV, the variability that's happening in our heart rate, which I'll explain later on. If our feelings, emotion and thinking is always in the mode in which we switch on the stress response, then we are always having a lot of problems. So these stresses can then be fatal insofar as all the diseases that you know today, whether it's heart attack, whether it is high blood pressure, whether it is cancer, whether it is failure in life, even the manifestation in terms of failure in life, hopelessness in life, and so on. So what is important is for us to be able to switch off the physiology to become more calm. And there are many aspects. For example, now they talk about mindfulness, to switch off the heart rate variability by mindfulness. What is mindfulness? Mindfulness is thinking of the transcendent. What is the transcendent? The transcendent is talking about the spiritual, emotional, and mental realm. So, from the perspective of Islam, we are propounding to Muslim psychologists and psychiatrists to go beyond the secular, materialistic model of just physical body. Because the physical body, from the perspective of our estimation, we talk about the Iceberg Principle or the Pareto Principle, 80-20. 20% is physical physiology. That means the realm, conscious realm, and manifestation as we see, as we manifested from the feeling, thinking, which affect our behavior in the physical world. But the input, 80% is hidden. 80% is the spiritual, emotional, and mental. So we are talking about now, this is 80%. And we are talking about this is only 20%. So the overemphasis in the physical reality is what is causing the disease of the modern man. Everything that we see today is based on just the physical manifestation. So how these stresses is being switched off constantly. If you take a list of all the stresses that modern men face, because the ancient man, maybe as I say, they face the tiger or the python or the lion. But modern man faces what? What are the main stresses? The main stresses of modern man is, for example, divorce, failure in relationship, loss of job, loss of status, could not buy a Ferrari, could not buy a big bungalow, and all those are stresses. Actually, people are dying to get into that level where all the time their amygdala is switched on, and so long as they are switched on, they're actually not thinking. So when they are not thinking well, they are actually performing below their full potential, as well as in any stress situation, they would fail in whatever endeavor that they do. So what is important is for us to then understand that if we are going to provide an answer to the modern world from the Islamic perspective of post-Islamic psychology, remember, we cannot deny the physical existence. The physiology is the key. Yes, because all the indicators that we feel, all the emotions that we have, all the thinking that we manifested, all the signals of the input is coming consciously to the realm of the physiology. But it is actually coming through the realm of the spiritual, emotional, and mental, in which, inshallah, in the future videos, I will elaborate, because this has been discussed by the great scholars of Islam. That's why I always say, let's go back to the great manuscripts of our great scholars, of Ibn al-Qayyim, At-Tarbani, Ibn al-Miskiyah, Al-Imam Ghazali, and so many of them. They have this treasure trove of how they describe the spiritual, emotional, mental realm in consonance with the physiology that we see today. So we have a holistic model, a beautiful model that is completely coherent, that is completely giving us the idea of how we can exist, and how actually when we understand this, we can be an achiever in our behavior, and we can actually change the state in which we are living now to a higher state of iman, a higher state of achievement, a higher state of success, a higher state of peace, happiness, and success. Inshallah, I'll explain to you in slightly more detail, so that inshallah you are inspired from hearing what I have said to do some research, be a Muslim psychologist or psychiatrist, do more studies, come up with a better model than what Professor Mahdi Jenkins and myself has propounded as a basis in which we can develop the ummah to become an achieving ummah and we ourselves can be achievers in this life with the grace of Allah, inshallah.